Hey, Steve, are you there? Hello to everyone in the chat. Hey, Steve, are you there? Oh, shit. I can't hear you now. I think you got to make sure your mic's connected. Hello to everyone in the chat. We are just waiting for Steve. He's having a few technical difficulties. It looks like he's muted. I can unmute him. Let's see if that works now. Can I hear you now, Steve? One second, guys. There we go.
Modern technology, what a wonderful thing it is, eh?
How are you doing, man?
I'm very well indeed. Very sorry for my for my technical problems. Yeah,
it's all good. It gave us a second to have the chat, the live stream warm up with some people. So
cool.
How are you hanging in there? You staying healthy and everything?
Yeah. I mean, I've actually been in between Zoom calls today and different conference calls. I've been doing quite a bit of exercise. I've been doing. I do 5-minute planks.
Nice. So, that's hard.
Yeah, it's not easy, but I've got myself up to doing 5 minutes at a time now, and I've done 3 sets of 5 today, and
I'll have to start doing that too.
I got a treadmill for my studio in the house here, which luckily enough arrived before everything completely locked down. Yeah. So I'm all set in that department. You know, it's been good just to be able to do that. Go out for regular walks in Regent's Park and Primrose Hill. So yeah, as long as I social distance, I feel that I can, I enjoy getting out, getting a bit of fresh air and.
Awesome. I feel you. Well, I just want to give a short introduction. We'll, of course, get into a lot of stuff today for everyone in the chat. Of course, you are one of our managers. I think we've known each other for a little over a year now and been working with each
Right.
other for like a year now, which is great. And like I said, we'll get into it. But obviously, you're credited with discovering Coldplay, and you're the founder and partner of X-Ray Touring and agent for Eminem and Queens of the Stone Age and huge acts like that. And a cool, interesting thing about you is that you've kind of been in the music industry from every angle, from an artist perspective, a promoter, an agent, and a manager. So,
Pretty much.
before, yeah, before we get into all that, I just wanted to get your take on what's going on with the whole COVID-19 thing in the music industry, because I know a lot of people watching are either in bands or they're fans of music and have bought tickets, and now things aren't happening. So if we look into the Steve Strange crystal ball, how do we see the next, years shaping up in terms of, touring, record releases even, and everything?
Well, I think, it's an ever changing, near enough like on a weekly basis. It's the way this whole virus has come into the world, the way it's spread throughout the world. The fear that people have with it, which they should be
Hmm.
afraid of this, and therefore be mindful of how they, the way. Obviously, the only way to stop this is that officially is actually for them to get some sort of vaccine that's going to work.
Yeah.
Uh, you know, until that happens, we have to follow the rule book, and the rule book is something that the world hasn't seen. You
Mhm.
know, I don't think that there's ever been a case, in modern day history where the world has been locked down. It's never happened. It's
Yeah.
it, we're hitting on completely new ground here, and it's a very frightening concept in every area, including the world's commerce. What damage it's going to do to the overall, the overall economic system of the world. Never mind the fact that we're having to sit in our houses, go out for the odd walk occasionally, and appreciate things that we probably never appreciated so much before.
Hmm.
Just getting out of the house,
Yeah.
going for that walk in the park, it means everything now. Whereas before it was something you didn't even do. And it's I never realized that I had such a beautiful park right next to my house in the form of Regent's Park. It's a big park, but had I really properly ever set foot into it? No, is the answer. I'll be very honest.
Yeah.
But how does this affect the overall structure of the live music industry, or the music industry in a bigger picture? It's it's going to affect everything as relatively as the world problems. Shows are dependent on people, being able to be close to each other, especially, if you're a rock band, you know, who wants to go to a show where you have to stand, everyone has a spot to stand in,
Yeah, exactly.
squares if you were to play a show, tomorrow in, say for instance, the Barry Ballroom, if it had a sequence of little squares and everyone had to stand in, it would be it wouldn't be a fun rock and roll experience, would it? Let's
I,
be honest. You
yeah,
know,
my fear about it too is that, even when the restrictions and stuff go up, I think people still are going to be fearful, 6 months from now, or depending on how this goes, of even going out into a mass gathering and actually buying tickets to see a show.
well, listen, I've got I had a full year pretty much booked, you know, before this thing hit into to proper a proper global, you know, situation, and I've had to pretty much, you know, resign to the fact now that I will lose my entire year's worth of touring, you know, which in one sense has, you know, the work had been done. It's actually given me twice the work or three times the work now because we're having to reschedule everything into different places, as so is everyone else. So availabilities, you know, are not as fruitful as what they once were. You know,
Yeah.
it's so there's going to be a hell of a lot of touring happening on top of each other, and it's going to be very, you know, like it's going to be very congested out there in the first half of next year. If
Because you're
not
saying like
more.
everyone's basically like going to be starting on day one all at the same time again once things go back to normal.
Well, we'll see. So, for instance, you know, an artist was planning to turn 21 anyway. All of the deferrals of, you know, the deferred tours from this year are landing on their doorstep. So therefore, there's, you know, and obviously there's only so many clubs, there's only so many halls and arenas, and the availabilities for those said venues are becoming impossible now. So if you're trying to actually route city by city, you know, and put together a routing, you know, that's going to make sense, you know, for an artist to do by bus or by splitter van or whatever, you have to be able to give them, you know, the logistical, you know, the logistical way of doing that, and it's making routing very very difficult now to be able to put into, you know, to put a tour together.
Yeah, and this summer too. I mean, and I know a lot of people that are going to be watching this had bought tickets to, you know, some of the biggest tours that we've had in a while. I mean, you got the Def Leppard Motley Crue tour, which is a stadium tour, and the Bon Jovi Bryan Adams tour, and Kiss was still doing their tour. So I mean, those are huge deferrals to have, especially if you're
Oh,
a smaller band that has, you know, an arena or a theater tour planned in 2021.
I couldn't agree more. You know, like it's true. And you know, you've got a lot of artists that actually had, you know, and I feel really bad for the Def Leppard Motley Crue guys,
Yeah.
you know, because that was such a huge statement for, you know, for that genre of music, and it showed, you know, that if you put a strength package together, it sells, and it really did sell, and it sold beyond its expectations to where they had to keep extending the tour
Yeah, exactly.
until 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 we hit this problem where everything has pretty much ground to a halt now. You know, like ticket sales, people are not interested at the minute in buying tickets until they know what the future of, you know, touring is. You know, they know that it's going to come back, but you know, the I think the public perception of the problem and also the public confidence has been dented very badly because of it. You know,
Yeah, I totally. It's very uncertain. I mean, kind of the last thing I want to ask you about this is, do you see this? Do you see this whole crisis, you know, changing the way that managers and agents and promoters kind of do business, or is this something once it kind of goes away, is it going to be back to normal, or is this kind of like creating a schism that will forever change the way people plan tours and routing and booking, what's in contracts, etc.
I think in the short term, very definitely it will. I think we're going to have to be, you know, let's say we being, you know, managers, being agents, you know, we have to be sympathetic to the, you know, to the new world, and it will be a new world for a period in time, because there's absolutely no chance that any country is going to come out of this unscathed.
Mhm.
It's going to be, you know, if you look at market by market, country by country, you'll see how much it affects, the general, economy of, of what's happening for every day, that everyone is not working for every day. I think businesses are suffering, governments are having to invent, schemes and loans and whatever, just to float their country. But that money has to come from somewhere, and it of course it's going to create some sort of a, it'll depend market by market, but there's going to be a global, there's going to be a global recession in some degree. Hopefully, it will sort itself out sooner than later. But I'm not being trying to be a pessimistic man here, but I think it's if we're to be realistic about it all, I think that this problem is going to be with us for some time, and I think we just have to live with it, and
Unfortunately, I'm kind of agreeing with you, but let's take it out of the 2020 and let's do the little biographical bit here.
I
So
want to try to put some sunshine back into this problem.
yeah, exactly. Let's get out of the
blue sky is what we want.
Yeah. So let's go back to the beginning. Talk about, your upbringing with music and how you got into music, because it's kind of interesting. You were an artist for the longest time before you got involved with actually doing, I think it was first promoting and then being involved as an agent. So why don't you go back and tell us about some of your first bands?
Well, I started playing, in my first proper bands, really, suppose when I was about 15. By the time I'd been through many different sort of little small, what I call community center bands, where we all gathered together and played and, tried to put a bunch of songs together. But to actually get it out on, to go out playing shows and whatever properly, I was about 15 years old, and the band was called Slack Alice. But yeah, it was a rock band. Northern Ireland had a quite a heavy cover scene back in those days.
Yeah.
A lot of the groups that was playing in the music scene mainly played a lot of rock covers. And for us, that was anything from UFO to Michael Schenker to Black Sabbath, right through to Blackfoot. And then in later bands it was Rat, Dokken, Accept, Motley Crue, and bit of ZZ Top thrown in there for good measure. I came from a hard rock background in the day. That's what I grew up listening to. But I also loved other great rock bands from the day. Like I loved Pink Floyd. I loved bands like Wishbone Ash. I liked, there was a lot of things that I liked that weren't necessarily like I loved the Who. The Who were to me just a great badass rock and roll band. And
for everyone that doesn't know in the chat, you're a drummer, so
I'm a drummer. So
that kind of explains some of the musical choices.
Indeed, I've always been a huge Rush fan throughout all my years. I was a big fan of bands like Triumph. I loved Ozzy Osbourne. I loved, I loved a lot of American bands. Like in general, the more the 80s come through, I think it was just out of what was coming from America at the time. I think that's what, even though Def Leppard are not an American band, they appeal to an American, a US centric thinking, and
they did the kind of like reverse Jimi Hendrix, where they broke in America and then came back and no one had even heard of them in the UK. Basically.
Good analogy. Yeah, I agree. And I've got to know those guys so well over the years. They're wonderful people. And I met Rick Allen when I was 15 years old. Uh, they were on the Paramania tour and they done warm up shows, and I don't even think they were warm up shows. They started their UK tour in Ireland,
Hmm.
and I managed to be a cheeky chappy as I was, and I managed to sneak through the back door of the Ulster Hall, past with the security were arguing with these two guys who were trying to get the attention of someone or trying to get someone to come out. And when they were busy arguing and keeping the security uh, away from me, I just sneaked past them and ran down the corridor. And I ended up meeting Rick Allen on the floor because he wanted to hear uh, his drum tech play his kit just so he could hear the sound. So I went, went up to him and started talking to him. And his brother was actually the tour manager as well, Robert Allen, who has gone on to actually manage Taylor Swift as it goes, or he's heavily involved with the management of Taylor Swift.
Wow,
You
I
know,
didn't know that actually.
yeah. So he was the tour manager of Def Leppard back then, and so it was a very, and I got I got on the good side of Rick. He was a lovely, lovely man. And we started talking, and he'd seen me as a kid, who was really into him as a player. And I think maybe I stroked his ego the right way. He called over his brother and said, "Give this kid a pass." He says, "I want this kid to be hanging out with me today." And he gave me some drum lessons, and that was on that tour. It was before the accident. He had two arms. He was able to show me some of the things that I really wanted to know about, because we used to cover some Def Leppard songs. So
Hmm.
there was a song called Overture in particular of the first album, and I absolutely loved that song. And he he showed me that every bit by bit, the bits that I that I just wanted to see him play and how he played it, and just and it was brilliant. Oh, it was. I got a 1-to-1 with him. It was, and I spent. He remembers it as well to this day.
That's awesome.
He
Yeah,
he he dines out on it actually.
yeah. Zach and I actually got to meet them when they were playing with Kiss a few years ago, and they're all super nice guys. It's
Lovely people. Joe's a lovely man. Obviously I managed Vivian,
yes.
which we'll come on to later. I managed Vivian outside of Def Leppard. I managed Last in Line, and we managed Vivian in that capacity. Um, and what a great guy he is. Like, I've known Vivian for so many years. He's from Belfast, where I'm from, and he made Northern Ireland proud, and in our heavy rock community. And he was, when he was in a band originally. He was all very, very good friends of mine, called Sweet Savage. And Sweet Savage actually, were one of the bands that Lars Ulrich was massively, not only Lars Ulrich, but Dave Mustaine and James Hetfield. They were all incredibly influenced by Sweet Savage back in the day, because they were. If you ever go online and listen to them, you can tell that they were a very fast, ferocious rock and roll rock band with great riffs that you could see where the history, where the early phases of thrash metal would have started.
Yeah.
And Vivian was, was part of that band and part of that lineup whenever that made, the most sense. Songs like Killing Time, Take No Prisoners, and whatever else. And, when Vivian left, he went to join Dio, because Dio, he had met Jimmy Bain on a tour of Ireland with when Jimmy Bain was in Wild Horses, and Wild Horses were a band that basically had Brian Robertson from Thin Lizzy, in the band, Jimmy Bain, who was in Rainbow, And then Ronnie James Dio reconnected with Jimmy, asked him, did he know any great guitar players? Jimmy said, I just saw this fantastic whiz kid in Ireland when we played with them called Vivian Campbell. He's your guy. And literally, Jimmy basically, according to Ronnie's story, Jimmy wasn't really supposed to be the bass player, but he sort of, but as they didn't have a bass player, he hitched his wagon onto the back of it all, and arrived with his bass at the rehearsal studio and became a member of Dio.
Sometimes
you have to love his cheek and his greatness. I love Jimmy Bain. He was such a character, and a great bass player and a great singer as well.
Yeah, that they had a lot of great players, and of course, a lot of those guys like Vivian went off to do other things in some other bands.
Well, that first Dio lineup was tremendous. You know, like when you think about those first, the first three albums, but especially the first two. The first song I ever heard by Dio was "Stand Up and Shout," and when that came out, and that was the opening gambit of an album. Holy shit! I'm glued already. Like I was right in there.
So when did you talk about you were playing in kind of cover bands and things like that, and so when did you really start working on original material, and you actually kind of were going through what we just went through a little bit with getting signed to a record label and trying to put out a record? How did that all happen?
Sorry, so what was
with No Hot Ashes, which was that really kind of your first major band?
That was my first, like I had been in bands, a couple of bands in between since the very start, what I told you about it earlier in this podcast. Like it literally, there was a couple of other things that took me to No Hot Ashes. No Hot Ashes were already a very established band in Northern Ireland and had already got a following. By that stage, I'd become a pretty competent player, and when their drummer left to go to England, he was moving to London. I went and auditioned. Well, it wasn't, in fact, I don't even think I auditioned. I think I was, I put myself in the frame. But I also had my cousin who was with me in my last band and had been a bass player previously, but he was a grade 5 piano player. So he changed his instrument about 2 years prior to that to play keyboards. So he had been in my the previous band to No Hot Ashes playing keyboards, and he was a great keyboard player. And I brought him in along with me into No Hot Ashes, which they desperately needed because, just the style of music that they were playing, their influences were anything from, Journey, Foreigner, Whitesnake, and, even into things like Rick Springfield and Night Ranger and bands like that. You needed a keyboard player, and they didn't have one. So I brought, we came together as a package. So they went from a 4-piece to a 5-piece with me joining and Tommy joining as an additional 5th member. And my cousin Tommy, we were brought up as brothers. We were a year apart. I'm a single. I'm an only child, and we were, and his brother was like 7 years older than him. So we were thrown together at an early age. I grew up together, he's more of my brother than he was like my cousin, not in honesty. And so that's when we started, and No Hot Ashes was a proper band. We had great songs in my opinion at the time. And I being the drummer and no one else having I would say the motivation, I started booking the gigs, which I still follow on to this day. You know, it started my career off.
Yeah.
And I also went and got as our manager and our record deal, you know, because our manager was a guy called Doug Smith in the Hot Ashes. Doug Smith managed Motorhead and Girls' School and Hawkwind at that stage. But he also ran GWR Records, who they were all signed to. And
Yeah.
He signed us, he wanted to sign us to his label first and then became our manager because he managed a lot of the artists that was on his label. It made complete sense. We didn't have a manager. I didn't want to be the manager, and we needed someone with clout. And he was the perfect, I'm still friends with him to this day.
Yeah, and a lot of bands I think too nowadays find themselves doing that, like you didn't, or getting involved with that and actually having to book their own shows and kind of becoming their own agents before they can even get an agent.
Well, I think I was intrigued by the business as well, and I really felt that that if I hadn't done it, no one else was going to.
Yeah.
I think I would have still been sitting in Northern Ireland, probably as a bricklayer or something. Or I did not want that as my future career. I was desperate.
Well, then how did it become your future career? Because that is what happened, isn't it? I mean,
yeah. And I basically the amount of demo tapes that we sent out, to different labels with the inevitable demo not being played at all because it's still sitting at the beginning of the cassette. And that this has never been played. It's not like these days where you had a CD and you would know whether it had been played or not. But back in those days, when you sent the cassette out, you could tell that it wasn't played because it was. Who would bother to rewind it to send it back to you? It was right at the very beginning. It's just that was just the way it was. It was who you knew, not what you knew.
So what happened after that? I was reading that you had did you guys all move to London, or just, I know you guys moved to London and that's where you kind of, and things kind of fell apart, and that's when you got into, was it first promoting for venues and things like that?
No, I joined Fastway after that.
Oh yeah, sorry, I forgot. We actually have a lot of Fastway fans that are also fans of our band as well.
Yeah, they were a great band, and Eddie was just a tremendous human being. He was brought in to help. We had a producer, which I'm not going to go into because I don't want to put anyone down, from back then. But he didn't do a very good job on the album. So we brought Eddie in to salvage the album that we had made for GWR, and he come in. I wanted him from the beginning, in honesty, and I near enough became unpopular with some of the other members of my band who had met this other guy that ended up producing the album, and I got outvoted. And I think I was proved right anyway. At the end of the day, the album was substandard to what it should be, and Eddie was brought in to repair it. And we had to fly different people back to do various things and whatever. But we got an album that was sounding great. Like Eddie had produced a lot of stuff over the years, and he done a really, really, really good job at bringing the No Hot Ashes album up to speed. But unfortunately, GWR Records, in the middle of all of this, after spending a lot of money of theirs, GWR was funded by, it was more or less a Douglas's vanity label, but it was paid for by a company called PRT, which used to be PYE. If you ever see some of the old 70s records, Pi records they were a big independent in the 70s. There was quite a lot of big artists signed to them. But anyway, not to bore anyone. We basically made the album. The record company went bankrupt, or PRT went bankrupt, which meant technically that GWR effectively finished with it, because they didn't have, they were subsidized and funded by the bigger company. So our album never came out. Eddie asked me to join Fastway. I joined Fastway. We went and played a lot. Then Eddie decided he had a few personal problems that he needed to deal with. This was in '89, and he put the band on ice, which eventually, until 20 years later, the band was still on ice.
Yeah.
But me and him remained very good friends. He was an incredible man, incredibly generous. I was actually living in his apartment in Belsize Park in London, and he was very generous. I had very little to no money. He was very, very financially generous, but just very generous as a person, And years later, because we kept in touch and and he was getting a real itch to go out and play again, and so was I, in honesty. And it happened because there's a festival in Europe called Sweden Rock, and Sweden Rock asked us to reform and offered us a fair amount of money to go and do so. And this offer came up in a conversation at ILMC, which is the International Live Music Conference. And there was another guy there who also ran several other rock festivals throughout Germany, Holland, and Belgium. He was just, or his friends did. He says, well, I'll be your agent, and I'll go book all of these other festivals around it. So all of a sudden, we had about 10 European festivals playing with anyone from Iron Maiden right through to to Aerosmith to whatever, and we had a tremendous time. And then we got a because I think social media had become a bigger thing, by that point, that Lloyd Park in Japan found out that we were touring again, and reached out and asked us to play. Paid us quite a lot of money, because number one, Fast Eddie had never played in Japan ever, and neither had Fastway, neither had him with Motorhead. That classic Motorhead lineup never went to Japan, which is
that's amazing,
pretty massive.
Yeah.
So we get well paid for that. It meant that everyone could travel comfortably to Japan, and we had a great time. And if anyone wants to go on YouTube and go Fastway Japan, they can see the results from it, because there's about 5 or 6 songs up there.
I was actually checking out some of those when I was doing my homework for this interview. He gives you a little Mr. Steve Strange on the drum shout out at one point.
Good old Toby Jepson, singer.
So I'm curious to really how you got into the whole promoting and agency side, because it does happen sometimes, but it seems rare. A lot of times musicians just kind of get stuck in their own thing of being musician, and they rarely actually branch out and becoming managers and agents and things like that. So how did that happen? That started when you were in London, right after Fastway kind of was put to the side?
Well, do you want us to say that? But I'm going to double back a little. I'm going to go back a little bit. I was promoting shows since I was 15, 16 years old in Northern Ireland. I had a regular rock club in a place called Whitehead, which was a seaside town in Northern Ireland. I had this fantastic idea: let's do a matinee rock club. Because it meant that I was able to get the bands cheaper, because in those days there was no in-house product, PA and lights.
Yeah.
A band had to go and rent their PA and lights out from a sound company, from a music shop that had PA hire facility, which is what we used to all do, in the day, because there was no PA and lights in a venue, because it was just a stage. You arrived and that was it. And you had to bring everything with you. So I thought to myself, I had this smart idea. Northern Ireland's a small place. You can get to any part of Northern Ireland pretty much in 2 hours. And I thought to myself, well, if I had a matinee gig where the band went on at 3, they were packed up by 5, or 5:30, they could get to wherever they were going to by 7:30, and they open up the doors at 8:30, and they, 8:30, 9 o'clock, and they go and play. And it worked. I ended up selling. I was earning nearly as much money as my father was when I was 16 years old running this rock club. I had 200 people in it every Saturday afternoon without fail, because I built up a following and people wanted to go there every week. It was like £2 in. But when you add all of those £2 up, and I done a door split with the group. I didn't even pay them a guarantee. It was a door split, and I ended up getting 50%, and they get 50%. But they had a second gig to play that day, and they only had one day's PA rental, one day's PA and light rental. So they were getting a double bubble. I was getting an afternoon show, and they got to play actually probably a better gig in the afternoon than they were going to play in the evening. So anyway, back to the other thing. So that's where I had always been intrigued by the other side of the business. I think there was always a manager within me. There was always an agent within me, and there was also a promoter within me. They're all similar styles of things in many ways, especially the agent and promoter. It's a matter of delivering. You're just on either one side of the tennis court than the other. But I started off as a promoter, but I turned an agent after Fastway. Because I was living in London. And at that point, I'd moved out of Eddie's place, and I was living in a shared flat. And I needed something to do. I needed something to keep me there, to earn me money. And a friend of mine who I'd met, obviously over that whole period in London, was an agent, and he said, "Well, why not come and work with me?" And I did. And that person was Adam Parsons, who now manages. He's also one of my closest friends for the last 30 years. But he manages Thin Lizzy. He manages Black Star Riders. He manages Europe. He manages Uriah Heep and Saxon. And and I do Saxon, and also Stiff Little Fingers. God bless. Who are another amazing, they're another Northern Ireland tradition who I'm very, very proud of. He went on to become a very successful manager. I started working for him, and he was an agent at the time. He had a little agency. We were all working within an office space that would be smaller than your average toilet. But looking back on it, they were such fun times, and he was very good to me. And he also understood that, that I was starting to outgrow his company, and I needed to go elsewhere. And so I went, and I moved on from that point and became an agent.
So let's skip ahead a few years because I know a lot of people are always wondering about the discovering Coldplay story, and I want because obviously you discovered them and you've had a how long have you been working with them? I mean, it's got to be over 20 years now, right?
Well, over 20 years, yeah, it is. Um, well, listen, when I started being an agent, like my roster, I grew up in the 80s as a heavy rock fan, but I was always a very open-minded person, in terms of my music. I always loved a lot of diverse stuff, more so as time went on, the latter half of the 80s, I was starting to really listen to a lot of you know, different aspects of music, different genres. And when I went into what were like Adams, his agency was more heavy rock. But when I moved into a more broader based agency, in terms of full circle, and more full circle music division, I was in a different place, so I started I started going for other things, and the first band that I ever picked up was a band called Ash. And Ash are, never really broke very big in America, unfortunately, which was a luck of bad, just bad luck, really. I think it
Mhm.
wasn't anyone's fault. It was just bad luck with the times, and also with the different record companies that they signed to. Where everything looked glorious at the beginning, it sort of ended up the person who signed them left or got fired or whatever, and then they ended up with they ended up not breaking there. But anyway, I'm just trying to pave the way to the story for Coldplay. So my musical thing started to change. I picked up Ash. I picked up Placebo, who was another band that done incredibly well in Europe. In fact, they're still an arena band to this day. Um, and bands like Gomez as well, who I've been looking after for 22, 23 years, who are a big band, and they do well in America as well as they do well in Europe. Um, that led on to me, just exploring working with different styles of artists. And a press officer that I've been working with had been working with Coldplay, and she said, "You really need to be onto this band Coldplay. There's a bit of there's a bit of an underground buzz starting with this band, and labels are starting to show up regularly to some of their really small early shows." And I went to see them in front of about, I don't know, 60 people.
Sounds like a temp show.
Maybe 70 people. The room looked good, the room looked very good, at the time, but it was still, compared to where they went to,
Mhm.
it was a small show. And I approached their manager, Phil Harvey, who was at the time, who's still involved with the band to this day. In fact, he's the fifth member, near enough, of Coldplay. He's credited as such, and quite a lot of of their albums. Brilliant man. We ended up talking. I put a package together with them and a band from Iceland called Bellatrix, which I was looking after at the time. And we went out into the UK and we sold out everywhere. And I built it from there. Like I built it, but before they'd even signed to EMI.
Yeah, I mean, that's kind of another question I had for you. How do you just because I know a lot of people are going to be watching this who are in bands and who are aspiring musicians. It's interesting the process of actually discovering a band and finding that and what a band needs to do to attract the attention of someone like you. And maybe you could also go into how you ended up finding us as kind of an example of that.
Well, I think it's through people, who obviously, the more successful, I suppose, you come, the more you get submitted to you, and because the busier you become on the back of it, the less time you've got to listen to material. Don't get me wrong, I'm one of those people that listen to music a lot, and that I'm not saying I'm an exception, because I'm not, because there's a lot of people that are like me, that their life is either about music or surrounded by music, and that's certainly what I am. Um, I think the answer to your problem is you take tip offs of people that you respect, and in your case, Malcolm Dome, who's uh, a legendary UK journalist and a friend, of the family, as of your family. Um, he was very inspired by you guys, and wanted to let me know. And again, when Malcolm turns around and said, "There's a band that you should listen to," I'll listen to them. Because it comes from great stock. You know what I mean? It comes from great. It comes from someone that that you have ultimate respect for as a professional and as a music lover. And by God, he wasn't wrong.
So,
You know,
despite someone actually asked this question before in the chat. Love Lep asked this question. I can't remember their name off the top of their head. I know them. But,
I'm sorry, but I'm going to have. It's a terrible habit, but I'm going to light up a cigarette.
Go for it. They so if you're not referred about a band, they're asking like how do you decide that a band is worth your time or even has a future? Like what do you really look for? Let's say you were just in a club, not referred to anything, and you see a band that you're thinking of, signing either to a management deal or we want to be their agent. What exactly are the parameters you're kind of looking for in an artist?
Well, I think it starts off with the music, obviously. Listen, ultimately, some things are there to be developed as well, and whether that's, a stage presence, whether that's a look, an image or whatever, those things are secondary, because if you don't have the music, and it's personality and music is the two things that I always look for. And I think that in order to be a star, you have to, like, as far as the lead singer is concerned, he has to have LSD, lead singer's disease.
Oh yeah. Luckily, our lead singer doesn't have that yet, but I don't know. Maybe he'll.
Oh no, he does. He does. He does. He's got that underlying confidence about not being scared.
Yeah.
Like it's about alter ego. Alter ego is what he's got. When he comes off the stage, he's a lovely bloke, and he should be to the day he dies. But when he walks on that stage, he becomes a rock star. And what's very important is to leave that at the same step that you walked up on the way down the stairs as well, and become realistic again. But when you're on that stage, you're there to be a performer, and that goes for every musician. You have to perform out of your skin wherever in every opportunity, because you've got a responsibility to that audience. Or if you don't put that effort in, that audience isn't going to. They're not going to you're not going to build with that audience. It's as simple as that. You have to break that brick wall down between the stage and the audience every night.
Yeah. Yeah, totally.
And your singer has definitely got it.
Well, He's listening now, so I think he's enjoying
Oh, good. Well, you know,
the.
but leave that LSD at the side of the stage when you walk off.
Well, I'm just going through the comments now to see if there are any other questions because I think we can wrap it up. This was super fun. I just want to see if I missed anything, or if anyone has any questions right now before we sign off. Quickly, shoot them in the chat, and I can ask them. I know some people were asking, about the let's see.
Yeah, let's do a little bit of a questions and answers. Yeah, I'm here for as long as you want me, buddy.
And well, Andy Gould asked if you're wearing pants.
Yes. There you go, Andy. I hope you're wearing pants too.
Leslie was asking what your favorite Tempt track is that you've heard so far.
Do you know what? I've got so many. So many. It would be hard for me to actually put a definition on that. The first track that really opened up my door for me was Dangerous. It had such energy, and Two Ways just became one of my most played songs ever. But there's certain songs that that just have. You're a band with diversity. That's what I love about Tempt. Is you're not just a rock band. You've got great pop sensibilities. It's a case that there's not many bands that can actually cross over the way that Tempt have got the ability to, and that's what me and Andy see in you. There's so many different ways that we can take this ship. We can take it in many different directions, and I think that your audience is everyone, and you are diverse enough to have a big everyone. In my book, I just love just so many songs that you do, and you just keep churning them out and keep inspiring me every time. And I know I can speak for Andy in that as well, and for Alan Kovac, our label head.
Yeah, I'm gonna try to actually get Alan on as well to try to get an interview with him if he has any time. I'm not sure what he's gonna do at this.
I would hope he would do it for you.
Yeah.
And I'm sure Mr. Gould has to be on that.
Well, yeah, he's a given, of course.
Because that man, is a legend as well in every capacity. He's managed some of the biggest rock bands in the world. He's managed, anyone from Linkin Park to Guns N' Roses, into the other world, like such as Morrissey. He's managed Lionel Richie, for Christ's sake. He's also one of the most well-known people in the business. There's not very many people that in the music business that you mention Andy Gould's name to, that they can say that they either, more importantly, they actually either know him or they know of him.
Yeah.
Most people know him.
You're giving me a good introduction for when he interview. Okay, here's the last question I'm going to throw at you. I actually missed this, but someone remind me. Pat Nagel asked if you knew who the Mama's Boys were from Belfast. Do you know who they are? They're a band, I think.
Listen, John McManus from Mama's Boys is my flatmate. He's sitting in the room above me. In the room above me.
Oh my God. I missed that question before. I should have asked that. I'm not sure if he's still in the chat, but hopefully he's.
You've met him. You met him at my house in LA.
Oh yeah, that's right.
That's John.
John was
the lead singer, bass player in Mama's Boys.
I had no idea. Oh my God, that's hilarious.
That is the most bizarre and most It's crazy. Yes.
That's
Yes,
amazing.
I was Mama's Boy's agent, from 1990 to 1993.
Wow.
That was my first proper signing in the day. When I was at Adam Parsons' agency, Big Rock. I signed Mama's Boys, and I had toured with Mama's Boys. Like the No Hot Ashes done a whole bunch of dates with Mama's Boys in the day. They were an amazing band. And John has been a friend of mine for 37 years. He's been there a long time. That
Oh,
is
Pat is still in the chat and watching, so he's excited about that.
Yeah, no, John's been my flatmate for the last 10 years.
That's
And
awesome.
and travels back and forward with me to LA.
Yeah, I didn't realize that's who you were referring to. I didn't.
Yeah,
We met him.
that's it.
That's awesome. Okay, well, I think with that, I don't see any other new questions coming in, so I think we're gonna leave it at that. That was super fun, and I think
I loved it. I loved every minute of this. Thank you,
yeah,
Harrison.
that was great. So we'll leave it at that, and I'm gonna sign off. And this will be going up on YouTube for other people to watch. So if you didn't catch it, it'll be up there.
I look forward to seeing it.
Awesome. Stay safe.
Same to you, my friend. See you
See
later.
you.